Hey everyone, this is Mike, and I wanted to take a few minutes to cover some cash handling procedures for your business. Whenever you make a sale, we hope that we have profit, and we never want to wake up in a situation where we have less of that profit than we thought that we did, particularly not because we made some simple mistakes. So I'm going to cover some of those simple cash handling procedures that are worth looking at for your business. And I might do a more advanced video later, but let's start with some of the basics for right now. So starting with cash, probably the most important thing to focus on when you're doing a cash transaction is to take your time and pay attention. The vast majority of mistakes happen because you're moving too quickly or because you're distracted, maybe by conversation or in the process of counting the money. You get distracted. You never want to run into that situation. So whenever you have a cash transaction, somebody hands you money, you obviously want to grab it with your hands. You want to feel the money and you want to look at it. Pay attention to what you're doing here. Often, especially in mattresses, you could be counting $1,000. You could be counting $2,000. You don't want to make any mistakes here. So step one, good rule of thumb, you are always counting the money yourself. I don't care if the customer counts it out one bill at a time for you onto the table. You take that money in your own hands and you count it. We're never taking anybody else's word for it. We're never trusting just our eyes. We want to trust our hands also. Another rule of thumb, let's say you're counting the money and you get interrupted for some reason. Let's say you're counting all the way to $900 and you get to 880 and you're counting that last 20 and a customer says, "Oh, hold on a second. I need to keep one $20 bill. Here, let me give you two tens for that 20." And they hand you two tens and they take the 20 back. This is going to seem silly, but you need to stop, put all that money back together, and count out the 900 again. Once you get some practice with this, it will not take you very long, but that is very important to do. Mistakes and or fraud happen when people get distracted, people get interrupted. In fact, it's a very common con artist tactic. And ideally, we're not going to run into very many of those over the course of our career, but if we can stop even one, that could be a lot of value to you. So we're always going to do that. Next, if you have to make change, here's a good rule of thumb. You always leave the money that the customer gave you in your field division and the customer's field division. Make the change to the customer's satisfaction and then put the money that they paid you into your money bag, your cash register, whatever it happens to be in your location. So this is very important because you never want to count money and then stick it in your pocket or stick it in your cash bag, then make change, and then your customer says, whoa, no. I didn't give you $850, I gave you $900. And then you have to start pulling money back out, and maybe it's been mixed with other money, or maybe the customer thinks something funny happened. You never want to do that. Leave the money inside of both of you, make the change to their satisfaction, and then put the money away. Again, if you get interrupted in the process of counting change, start the entire process again. They gave you $900, the bill was $820, and you counted back $80 to them, and they said, "Oh, no, I don't want 4 20s, I want 3 20s, a 10, and 2 5s. Well, don't just take 120 back and make change for the 20. Take all $80, fix the last $20 bill, and then count them out the $80 and change again. Also, another good rule of thumb, when you're counting back change, this is a little bit old school, but there's a reason that this is the way that people used to do it. Let's say the bill was $810 and they gave you $90. You don't want to just hand them $90, and you don't even want to count 90, 20, 40, 60, 80, $90. Here you go. That is not the right way to count back change. So if the bill is $810 and they gave you $900, you want to pull out the $90 yourself, then you put the 10 like on the table, or you could do it in their hand. I like to do it onto a table or onto a counter. Put down the 10. So that's $820, then count out your 20s, 40, 60, 80, and $900. So you're counting up to the amount of money that they gave you. You start with what the bill was and you count up to the amount that they gave you. This will help prevent some mistakes. Again, we count up to the customer's satisfaction. They seem satisfied. They take the money. Then and only then you put the money that they paid you away and you move on. Okay, so we're often dealing with a lot of money, so you want to make sure none of it is counterfeit. They make UV lights. They make the counterfeit pens. Those aren't perfectly reliable, but they're probably better than nothing, especially if you don't have a lot of cash handling experience. You could buy it at an Office Depot or a Staples or something like that for just a couple dollars. You want to swipe it on probably anything greater than a $20 bill, probably 20s, 50s, and 100. And what you want to look for, you want to see yellow or like light brown on the fabric of the money. If you see like a very dark brown or a black, that is a problem. You should not be accepting that bill. Now, what you do at that point, if you ever run into a situation like that, is really your prerogative. What you're supposed to do, at least according to the Secret Service, is keep that bill, distract the customer, and notify your local police. Whether you want to put yourself in that position or not is really up to you. If you want to choose to just reject it and give them their money back, that's, again, your prerogative. But what you're supposed to do is keep the money, put it in a bag, notify the local police, and go from there. So you have those pens available, but again, the biggest tip-offs are going to be your feel, because counterfeit money almost always feels fake, or it will look fake. So you should know what the bills look like. You should know which president goes on which bill, things like that. And there are some common things to look for. You can hold a bill up to light and see the holographic image. You can see the magnetic strip. But again, the fabric of the paper is really what's going to be a tip-off for most people, as well as the look. Almost all cases of counterfeit bills, when even the teller who made the mistake in the first place looks at it on second glance, they know that it's counterfeit. The only reason it got passed is because they were distracted or they were going too quickly. And that goes back to what we were talking about in the first place. Okay, cards. When you take a card, the back of the card is supposed to be signed. If you read the back of any sort of credit card, it'll always say that authorized signature is required. Good practice, if it's not signed, is to ask the customer to sign it. If you're not going to do that, at the very least, you should probably look at their ID, and you want to see a picture ID that looks like the person you're talking to, and you want the name on that ID to match the name on the card. This should be obvious, but again, if you are too rushed at this phase, you might not think about these things, and that is where mistakes and that is where fraud can happen. Also, if you have a card that has a chip in it, you should be using that chip when you run it. If you use the magnetic strip when it has a chip, you are liable for any and all fraud that is reported. And so this is a really big thing to focus on. If it has the chip, you must use it. Now, some of the old cards don't have chips, so that's fine. You can use the magnetic strip. That will actually be on the card issuer if there's a case of fraud. But if it does have the chip, you should always be using the chip. Let's see. Anything else worth mentioning on cards? That's probably it. Again, you always want to use the more secure method. So first chip, then magnetic strip, then keying in. So in that order, only using keying in when you absolutely have to, because that's going to be the most expensive option as well. Finally, checks. If you want a good rule of thumb, don't take any checks. Most people nowadays don't even have checkbooks or don't use them for most transactions, but every once in a while they'll come up. If you want to use a check, just know that you're taking some risk, because checks are a lot harder to verify on the spot than is cash. So that is a risk for you, but if you choose to do so, there are some things you can look at. Let's see. Start with the date on a check. You want it to be dated for the day that they're making the transaction. You don't want it to be dated in the future. It's called post-dating. Usually people do that if they don't want you to cash the check yet because they're scared it won't clear. That's probably a bad sign for you and your business. But you also don't want it to be dated more than 30 days in the past. You're going to run into issues if you start accepting checks in a situation like that. Also, here's another little rule. When they write in the amount of the check in words and then they write in the amount with numbers, you want to check that those match. And if there's ever a discrepancy, you should probably have them rewrite the check. But if there is ever a discrepancy, the written in words amount is the legally binding amount. So if they write the numbers for 900, but they write 800, and then there's ever a dispute, well, guess what? You're probably getting 800. So definitely double check that. You usually want to, on a check, you'll see the bank, the issuing bank. They'll have a logo or sometimes an address, usually in the lower left-hand corner. So that's good to take note of. A lot of times you can call these banks and ask to verify the check. Usually over the phone, they're not going to tell you if they have sufficient funds, but you can at least verify that the person has a valid account with that bank. So that can help limit some of the fraud. They might not have enough to pay for what they're giving you, but at least you can find out if they have an account. And also at the very bottom, obviously, you want to see the routing numbers. You want to see the account numbers. That should be text that is flat on the paper. It should not be raised. It should not be shiny. It should be a matted text on the actual paper. You also want to see a little padlock symbol over on the right-hand side of the check. That usually means it has security features. You can turn the check over, see some of the security features that it has. Oftentimes they'll have watermarks or chemical tests on them, and you can verify that those are in good order. Also, this should be obvious, but if you look and it's a Bank of America check, and if for some reason there's a Bank of America phone number on the check, don't call that number. Pull out your phone and look up Bank of America's actual phone number, because if you have a fraudulent check, they might just have a fake number on it. So obviously you don't want to trust that number. You want to use a number that you independently verify on your own. Okay, there's a lot more to be covered here, especially as it relates to banking and how employees cover cash and all of those sorts of things. But at least for now, here are some tips that you can hopefully use for your business to prevent mistakes and prevent any fraud. Okay, talk to you soon.